space in the heart of Soho, presenting the very best of contemporary photography. We'll take a look. First, tomorrow is the 5-year anniversary of the Grenfell Fire, the tragedy that took the lives of 72 people on June the 14th, 2017 in North Kensington. Today and tomorrow we'll hear from a number of those affected, including the bereaved and residents still fighting for justice half a decade on. Well, a criminal investigation into the disaster is still underway, but the Met Police has said no prosecutions will be brought until the findings from the second phase of the public inquiry are published. Though today they said they're absolutely focused on solving the problem. So far, fewer than half of the recommendations from the public inquiry have been adopted into law, according to the Home Office, while the process has left survivors and bereaved families feeling unable to move on. A resident from Bramley House, which is another estate next to the Grenfell Tower, Mohammed Tarani, who is now 66, watched a video from the fire. He urged residents to try and get out of the burning building that fateful night.
No matter what you do, it's in your mind. No matter how you... for 4 years I used to cry every time you asked me a question. I couldn't hold myself, and I'm trying my best to, but still it's inside me. You can't help it. I used to get, I still do, but I'm controlling it. You get flashback of the night, people behind the window begging for their life. If I had the opportunity to go inside the building, I would have done, yeah. But even with the fireman, I tried to go, but I didn't have one of those things to shield myself to go there. I would have been dead before I get to the building. So it's just horrible.
Another Bramley House resident, Samir Badani, who's 47, spoke about that night's legacy and the effect it continues to have on the community.
So 5 years on, there's no accountability, there's no consequences for bad behaviour. Worse than bad behaviour that led to the loss of life. And there's no consequences and there's no accountability. So it's worse than misinformation, is actually pretending that it didn't happen. And once they stop pretending, accept responsibility, they will help us with the healing process. But we don't have 5 years to spend telling them the same thing. And actually it's bad for our mental health because we keep on stumbling upon a wall of resistance when we heard from the Prime Minister at the time, we heard from authorities that they knew they had to change. They talked about culture, they talked about the way we were treated badly, but 5 years on, it's still the same wall, like people looking down on us. And we don't deserve that. No human being deserves to be treated like a second-class citizens.
Well, after 6:30, we'll hear from a resident, Edward, on how he believes the response 5 years on has been a portrayal of what he and others went through. Also on this, London's fire brigades' latest figures reveal there are 1,100 residential buildings in the capital that require residents to evacuate in the event of a fire due to fire safety defects, including dangerous cladding, among others. Other issues can include combustible balconies, inadequate fire doors or missing fire breaks. The affected buildings require measures such as continual waking watch patrols or a common alarm system to alert all residents to any fire, with leaseholders often having to cover the cost. Well, the Mayor Sadiq Khan said he was heartbroken and angry at the lack of action taken by the government over the last 5 years and wanted to accelerate the grants to cover those patrol costs. To date, just 83 grants have been paid out in London from the government's £30 million Waking Watch Relief Fund for the patrols. And Matt Rack, the General Secretary of the Fire Brigades Union, said removal of dangerous cladding in the UK has been painfully slow. Let's move on to some other stories from the capital today. Protesters assembled outside the High Court today before an appeal against the government's decision to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The Court of Appeal ruled just over an hour ago the first flight will be taking off tomorrow from Gatwick. Rights campaigners have argued that the government policy is inhumane and will put migrants at risk. The Judicial Review claimed that the Home Secretary's policy is unlawful, while the Home Office believes the plan is in the public interest and should not be stopped. And also at the High Court today, treatment for a brain-damaged boy in a coma should stop, a judge has ruled. Archie Battersby, who's 12 years old, was found unconscious at his home in Southend in Essex on the 7th of April. Doctors treating him at the Royal London Hospital in East London told the High Court it was highly likely he was brain stem dead and asked for his life support to end. Archie's mother, Holly Dance, said she was devastated and the family planned to appeal.
Basing the judgment on an MRI test, which is the first time ever, and that he's likely to be dead, is not good enough. This is believed to be the first time that someone has been declared likely to be dead by an MRI test. The medical opinion presented in the court was clear in that the whole concept of brain death is now discredited, and in any event, Archie cannot be reliably diagnosed as brain dead. I feel sickened at the hospital and the judge have failed to take the wishes of the family into consideration. I do not believe Archie has been given enough time. From the beginning, I have always thought, what is the rush? His heart is still beating, he has gripped my hand, and as his mother and my gut instinct, I know my son is still there.
Archie's mother, Holly, there. Now, another story for you now. A body has been found set on fire in a park in north-west London. The fire brigade went to the fire at Bellevue Park in Northolt, that's in Ealing, shortly after 4:30 this morning, and called the police when it was realised a body was involved. The deceased person is believed to be male, and police are trying to establish his identity and contact a next of kin. The death is being treated as unexplained at this stage. Also, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is under investigation by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards over potential breaches of rules on earnings and gifts. The investigation will see whether he broke 2 sections of the MP's Code for Conduct on Registering Interests. Sir Keir has insisted he is confident he has not broken the rules.
Well, that's an investigation and we'll be responding in due course.
What are you able to tell us about what that investigation is about?
Well, I need to talk to my office about that, but we're responding in due course.
Has it come as a surprise to you?
No.
So when were you aware of this?
Well, it's all MPs are made aware if there's any concerns. My office is dealing with it and will be replying in due course.
Are you confident that you've done nothing wrong?
Absolutely confident, there's no problem here.
According to an investigation carried out by the BBC, more than 100 Transport for London workers are known to have died from COVID-19. 75 worked on London buses, while 23 worked on the tube network. The majority were people belonging to ethnic minorities, and only 5 were women, TfL said. London Mayor Sadiq Khan said TfL has put in place a range of additional support for families and colleagues where there's been a bereavement. Kevin Spacey has been formally charged by the Metropolitan Police with 4 counts of sexual assault against 3 men. The 62-year-old disgraced Hollywood actor has also been charged with causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent. 4 incidents took place in London, 2 in 2005 and 1 in 2008. They were all men, now aged in their 30s or 40s. He is due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Thursday. A look at the weather before a quick break. Overnight, it will stay dry. Lows of around 12 degrees, with cloud gradually clearing through into the early hours to produce some clear skies in the morning. Tomorrow, we'll see a bright and fine day throughout with plenty of sunshine, around 24 degrees, then getting even warmer on Wednesday. More patchy cloud expected, though, late Wednesday and throughout Thursday, but dry and very warm nonetheless. Right, we're heading into a short break now, but still on the way. One father is looking to raise the awareness of the need for more South Asian stem cell donors to try and save his daughter. we'll hear from the man himself about the campaign.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's take a look at some national headlines now that affect Londoners. The UK economy contracted for the second month in a row in April, and the first back-to-back fall since COVID struck in 2020, as the cost of living crisis brought Britain's pandemic recovery to an abrupt end. Well, the economy fell by 0.3% in April, with all three main sectors suffering a fall in output for the first time since January last year. April's month-on-month drop in GDP also shrunk for the first time since January 2021 as well. The UK's competition watchdog has been asked to conduct an urgent review into whether a 5p fuel duty cut is being passed on quickly enough to drivers. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has urged the Competition and Markets Authority to examine the fuel market and whether there are local variations in petrol and diesel prices. Well, the cost of filling an average family car has now hit a record £100. And healthy human brains are hotter than previously thought and can regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius in a new study that suggests that in healthy men and women, where the temperature in the mouth is typically less than 37 degrees, average brain temperature is 38.5. However, the Medical Research Council found that deeper brain regions can often be hotter than 40 degrees, particularly in women during the daytime. Now, today is the start of Men's Health Week, and a Londoner diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2015 is now helping to launch a campaign to raise awareness of the illness. Chris Addison, who has now had the all clear, is part of the Shed by Shed Rebuilding the Fight Against Prostate Cancer campaign. The goal is to encourage men to check for signs and speak to their doctor, as 1 in 5 men over 50 years of age are missing routine GP appointments. Chris talks us through the importance of the campaign and getting checked up.
Well, we're trying to raise awareness about prostate cancer and encourage men to have a PSA test, because prostate cancer doesn't always have symptoms. So you need to be checked out regardless of how you're feeling. You may not have any waterworks issues. Waterworks issues can be a sign that you might have prostate cancer, but it's not foolproof. So the campaign is about trying to persuade and encourage men to have a PSA test by going to their doctor first of all.
Yeah, and a large proportion of men are still not getting checked up. They're still avoiding routine GP appointments. Even if they are experiencing symptoms, there's still that sort of stigma around it and not wanting to go, kind of like it will sort itself out in the end. Do you think that's still just as much of an issue now, even though we're constantly told to get checked up?
I think it is a big issue still. I'm not quite sure why men are reluctant to go. Maybe they have this if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But then prostate cancer blows that idea out of the water, because if there are no symptoms, it looks as if it doesn't need fixing.
Well, tell us a little bit about your diagnosis then, back in, was it 2015, and how you found out about it, and did you do the same thing that we were talking about these men doing?
Well, I had a friend of mine at church had prostate cancer, and he encouraged me to go and have a PSA test, and I just thought, well, I haven't had anything like that for maybe 10 or 15 years under a UK Biobank survey, and I thought, well, I would go and get checked. And fortunately, the doctor thought, well, come back to me in 3 months' time, have another blood test, and the value had gone up. And this is the point about PSA tests. The first value it is not fully conclusive always. So it's up to the doctor, in a sense, with their experience, to judge whether you should come back in 3 months, a year, or 5 years. And I think that's something that they have to grapple with. Fortunately, I went back in 3 months, had another test, and then 3 months again. So after a year, my value had gone up from 6 to 10. And at that point, the doctor asked me to go for a biopsy, and that proved to be conclusive, and I had a possibility of prostate cancer.
What would your advice then be to anyone watching this now about the campaign and what you went through?
Go to your doctor, look up UK MSA as well. Bayer UK are sponsoring this and backing this campaign this week. So I would say to any man out there, don't hesitate, go to your GP. I know GPs seem to be difficult to get hold of, but just keep pressing. It's your life, not theirs, your life.
Chris Addison there. Now, One Father is looking to raise the awareness of the need for more South Asian stem cell donors. Daven Sanasi is appealing to the community after his 15-month-old daughter Evie was diagnosed with macrophage activation syndrome earlier this year. She is currently undergoing chemotherapy but is in need of a stem cell donor matched to live a longer and happier life. Henry has been speaking to Daven about Evie's diagnosis.
We took her on a family trip to Mauritius to meet her grandparents, and while she was out there in the very first week, she developed a rash that kept coming and going, and a spiking fever that kept coming and going. We got airlifted to South Africa for better diagnostics. When we got there, again, it was confirmed that it was some sort of autoinflammatory disease. We thought it might just be this one thing and that's it. But unfortunately, and around December, and we went to our local hospital and we found out that it was Still's disease, also known as SJIA, which is a really nasty, rare, uncurable disease. But it's not life-threatening, and it can be controlled with medication. But then in March, she started getting unwell again, and we took her to Great Ormond Street Hospital, where she was diagnosed with macrophage activation syndrome, which is a complication of that Still's disease, and unfortunately that is life-threatening, and it can get out of control really quite quickly. So she's had to go on to chemotherapy. She has to being given that just to stay alive. So doctors told us that we needed a stem cell transplant for her to have any kind of chance of living any kind of normal life.
For you as parents to hear that must have been so hard to hear. How did you and your family react to that news?
It's like the stages of grief. You have denial, anger, all of that, and then you have hope because you find out that there is some treatment for this. It can be controlled. You read up about people that are living their lives with it, coping with it. But in the back of your mind, you're being warned that there is this tiny chance of this nasty complication, and then it happens to you. It's incredibly difficult. It's been the toughest moment. I've developed ulcerative colitis along the way, and I think that's down to the stress and the anxiety. So really difficult, really tough.
You're working with the blood cancer charity Anthony Nolan. So what's it been like with working with them? How great have they been in this process, and what are they doing to try and make sure that Evie gets better?
Anthony Nolan have been amazing. I got in touch with them on the offhand that they would be some help, but I wasn't expecting anything. But actually, they've given me a huge amount of support. They've tried to spread our message far and wide, and they really support what we're trying to do in terms of getting more and more people onto the register, particularly people who are underrepresented on the register. So people from Evie's ethnicity are underrepresented on that register, and we need more people on it because getting a match is like winning the lottery. Those are the kind of odds. So if you've only got 1,000 tickets, you're not likely to win. But if you've got 1 million, then your chances are good. So that's what we're aiming for. That's what Anthony Nolan are aiming for.
You're trying to raise awareness in the South Asian community that this is something that matters, and there is a worthwhile reason for doing it, aren't you?
Absolutely. And my focus naturally is on the South Asian community because of my child. But actually, I'll be clear and say this is actually for all communities, particularly those that are minorities because they're underrepresented. But, I've been speaking to people who are white British, and when they find out they need a stem cell transplant, there is no time to wait for the 10 out of 10 match. And, even white British families are going to have to go for poor quality matches. So, the more people on the register from all ethnicities, the better, including white people. But certainly when it comes to ethnic minorities, there are just not enough people. So your chances of winning or finding that needle in the haystack are so low. There are differences. You might know that someone needs a kidney transplant, and that's quite a big thing. Most people aren't going to give away their kidney, and I completely understand why. But what people need to understand is that donating stem cells is similar to donating blood. It's, everything is regenerated. You're not losing anything. It's not some nasty big procedure. It's just this simple thing that's so small but can save someone's life. And to join the register is 20 minutes effort on someone's part. So please do it. Please get on the register because there are lots of other children that are waiting.
Yay! Well done, Evie!
Henry with David there. You're watching London Live News with James Dickman. A reminder of our top stories coming up after the break. Plus, more on Grenfell 5 years on. A resident who says the government have left those affected out in the cold. Edward will share his story as he continues to demand justice.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just have a reminder of our main story from this evening. Tomorrow is the 5th anniversary of the Grenfell Fire, the tragedy that took the lives of 72 people on June the 14th, 2017 in North Kensington. Today and tomorrow we'll hear from a number of those affected, including the bereaved and residents still fighting for justice half a decade on. A criminal investigation into the disaster is still underway, but the Met Police has said no prosecutions will be brought until the findings from the second phase of the public inquiry are published. Though today the Met said they're absolutely focused on sorting that. So far, fewer than half of the recommendations from the public inquiry have been adopted into law, according to the Home Office. Well, the process has left survivors and bereaved families feeling unable to move on. Well, a resident from Bramley House, which is another estate next to the Grenfell Tower, Mohammed Tarani, who is now 66 years old, watched a video from the night of the fire. He urged residents to try and get out of the burning building that evening.
No matter what you do, it's in your mind. No matter how you... for 4 years I used to cry every time you asked me a question. I couldn't hold myself. And I'm trying my best to, but still is inside me. You can't help it. I used to get, I still do, but I'm controlling it. You get flashback of the night, people behind the window begging for their life. If I had the opportunity to go inside the building, I would have done, yeah. But even with the fireman, I tried to go, but I didn't have one of those things to shield myself to go there. I would have been dead before I get to the building. For us, it hasn't aged. It just seems it was last night. So 5 years on, and they try to ignore, they try to brush it under the carpet, but still, thanks to space and thanks to Grenfell United, that is fighting for justice.
Another Bramley House resident, Samir Badani, who's 47, spoke about that night's legacy and the effect it continues to have on the community.
So 5 years on, there's no accountability, there's no consequences for bad behavior. Worse than bad behavior, behavior that led to the loss of life. And there's no consequences and there's no accountability. So it's worse than misinformation is actually pretending that it didn't happen. And once they stop pretending, accept responsibility, they will help us with the healing process. But we don't have 5 years to spend telling them the same thing. And actually it's bad for our mental health because we keep on stumbling upon a wall of resistance when we heard from the Prime Minister at the time, we heard from authorities that they knew they had to change, They talked about culture. They talked about the way we were treated badly, but 5 years on, it's still the same wall, like people looking down on us. And we don't deserve that. No human being deserves to be treated like a second-class citizens. How can we heal if our humanity is taken away from us?
Also on this, London's fire brigades' latest figures reveal there are 1,100 residential buildings in the capital that require residents to evacuate in the event of a fire due to fire safety defects, including dangerous cladding, among others. Other issues can include combustible balconies, inadequate fire doors or missing fire breaks. The affected buildings require measures such as continual waking watch patrols or a common alarm system to alert all residents to any fire, with leaseholders often having to cover the cost. Well, the Mayor Sadiq Khan said he was heartbroken and angry at the lack of action taken by the government over the last 5 years and wanted to accelerate the grants to cover those patrol costs. To date, just 83 grants have been paid out in London from the government's £30 million Waking Watch Relief Fund for the patrols. Now, continuing with our coverage of the Grenfell Tower disasters, we look at the lives of those affected 5 years on. We hear from resident Edward Defan, who is part of the group Grenfell United, survivors and the bereaved, who have been searching for justice for half a decade now. Well, he lived on the 16th floor and had been a long-term campaigner about the issues at the tower. He described the government's apology as meaningless, coming so long after the events.
So I'm a member of Grenfell United. I'm a committee member. You know, our aims are to achieve, to get the truth, you know, which we hope in a fashion to do through the public inquiry, for justice, that people go to jail, and then finally that we can create a legacy for the 72 lives that we lost. And part of that legacy needs to be that people who live in social housing are never ever treated the way that we were treated, that they are respected, they're treated with humanity, their voices are listened to. And I'm afraid, you know, we're now coming up to the 5th year anniversary, and the evidence is that not enough has changed. Not enough has changed within social housing. And the white paper on social housing, which is the legislation that will potentially deliver meaningful change, is still making glacial progress through Parliament. And until that is turned into legislation, people in social housing, nothing has changed for them. For me, the 5-year anniversary is really about remembrance. It's really about taking some time to kind of remember the lives that we lost, you know, think about the, you know, amazing community that we had. And it's just such a shame that, you know, instead of being able to kind of do that, we are having to keep campaigning and keep fighting for the rights of disabled people in high-rise buildings, the rights for people that live in social housing, the fact that, you know, up and down this country there are still people living in buildings with the same cladding as Grenfell. And this isn't 5 weeks after Grenfell or 5 months after Grenfell, this is 5 years after Grenfell. And it's shocking that, you know, I truly believed in the days after Grenfell that it would be a catalyst for societal change. I was that naive, you know, and so little 5 years later on has changed. I can't believe that I thought that you know, that major things might happen because of Grenfell. It is about, it's like, you know, for me it's about, I really think that after 5 years that we should really be we shouldn't be in the position that we're in now. We shouldn't be having to campaign about personal emergency evacuation plans, or have to fight for cladding to be removed from buildings, or fight for the white paper on social housing. You know, and the way I look at it is if Hillsborough is to mean anything, you know, Grenfell survivors and bereaved shouldn't have to wait 3 decades to have their voices listened to. And you know, we're now 5 years into this saga, and we've got we've travelled so little distance up the road in terms of change that it's really, it feels almost like a betrayal that those people with responsibility to bring us change have acted in such an incompetent and indifferent manner towards us that we are where we are.
Is this the government mainly?
Mainly the government. I mean, you know, I think that we've had so many different secretaries of state, so many housing secretaries. I've lost count of how many times we've had to go and retell our story and then we're told that I'm different from the last person. I'm the one that's going to make the change, and then 6 months later on, we're fighting to get an appointment with them, and nothing has changed. And 5 years later on, there have been small changes, but the big changes haven't happened. And the fact that tonight disabled people who live in high-rise buildings face exactly the same danger as the residents of Grenfell faced on the night of the 14th of June 2017 should bring shame on this government. So the recommendations from phase 1 of the public inquiry, we were promised by Boris Johnson in October 2019 that they would be acted upon, and any fire safety issues would be legislated. They would take action, and yet the personal emergency evacuation plans, they've decided that it's too costly, it's too difficult. They're not going to do that. And as a consequence, disabled people face exactly the same risks that they faced just prior to Grenfell.
Edward Defarn there. Now stay with us for our final part this evening. The only student-run film festival in central London begins today. We'll hear about the Festival of the Moving Image from the UCL students behind it.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of this evening's show. Now, the only film festival in central London run fully by students starts today. The UCL Film and TV Society are hosting the Festival of the Moving Image this year. The university group produce 6 films per year, one in 16mm, just like the esteemed director Christopher Nolan, who was part of the society. Well, Henry has been speaking to the president of the group and the festival director.
Well dressed, appears to be in a rush. At 9 in the morning, he can only be headed for one place, an office somewhere in central London. And anyone working in central London makes for a potential target. Time to make a move.
Although it was originally started by a member of UCL staff, Vladimir Smith Meza, after a few years, it was given to the Film Society to run. And since then, it's been organised every year by students, fully run by students here at the UCL Film and Television Society.
And for you two, is that quite liberating in some ways, that you got free reign over everything?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think it also helps that we know what students want to see, and we can really open it up so students can explore their own work, and also hear from professionals that are already in the industry and know how to get out there. And it's a tricky industry to enter, and I think that part is really valuable.
It's gone. What is the moment, Claire?
We ultimately receive submissions for a short film festival from universities all over, and our guests are from a wide range of university backgrounds as well as non-university backgrounds. So it really does expand way past UCL scope.
I mean, this year we've received films from Portugal, we've received films from Eastern Europe. We're open to films from all around the world.
How does that make you feel that you're attracting attention from not just London, but the UK and beyond?
I mean, it's amazing. It's also really important to, as I was saying before, with different cultures, the festival is ultimately about expanding past kind of the Western scope. And I think the fact that we get submissions from places outside of the UK is really important to us.
So, Diego, tell me a little bit about your society then. I think you're lucky enough to boast the amazing Christopher Nolan as an alumni, aren't you?
Yeah. So our society has been going on since 1948. That's when it was founded as the UCL Film Unit. And it was created to film life here at UCL, document things going around London, as well as also produce fiction films after the war. And since then, we've our archive has grown. It goes all the way back to 1948, and as well as obviously Christopher Nolan, who also paid for the repair of this amazing camera that we've got here, the Arriflex, with which he shot his first feature, Following, as well as some shorts. And it's been also the main camera in the society. It was back when celluloid was the main way of filming. Since I believe the 60s, it's been used to document, as I was saying, life here at UCL, film, theatre plays, interviews with people from UCL and also from with politicians, with journalists. It's been used by people like Harry Bradbeer, the director of Fleabag, of Enola Holmes, to make his first film, which we've got in our archive, and we will be showing at the Festival of the Moving Image on June 15th at 9 p.m. So yeah, it's a really cool experience to be here in London, learning so much about film without having to study film. And we really work hard to make sure that we can provide those experiences to students here at UCL.
Way back for me, not for him. He's like 200 years old.
247?
Sorry, 247.
Isabel, Diego there has just mentioned some big names. Surely that inspires you guys, having some fantastic people who've been in the society in the past.
Yeah, and I think that also reflects on what we seek to bring to the festival, because a lot of times we see university as a way directly into a very certain type of job, or that because we study a certain field, we have to go into that field. And also understanding how film intersects with university education and the different things we study, and bringing that into the society has always been really important for us. So I'm also really looking forward to exploring that side of film society and how film society has documented the history of London, basically.
That festival is on until Wednesday this week. You can go and check out their website for more details. Right, some art to finish on. The Photographers Gallery is launching a special new set of works called the Soho Photography Quarter, a permanent new outdoor cultural space in the heart of Soho, presenting the very best of contemporary photography. And it's all for free. Well, let's find out more about what they're doing with the space.
The importance of this is the launch project for the Soho Photography Quarter. We wanted to choose an artist whose practice was very distinctive, so people would see it and think, oh my God, that is groundbreaking in his use of imagery and what he's trying to do. So Christian Thompson is an Indigenous Australian artist, and also, just interestingly enough, he was the first Indigenous Australian ever to get a PhD in Oxford, which he got in 2012, which is quite a remarkable achievement. And of course, he uses his art, which is video, installation, sound pieces, and of course, photography, to explore notions of his own identity, his own gender, and of course, the history of Australia and the position of Indigenous culture, especially in relationship to colonialism.
How is it that we're going to be able to see his art? Because he's done a lot. His breadth of work is really big and he works across different mediums. But for this specific exhibition, what can we expect?
So the exciting thing is that the outdoor space offers us a chance to show his images very large scale. I mean, the art frieze on which they're going to be shown is 45 metres long and 5 metres high. And the banners are equally big, 8 by 6 meters. So we're going to see them in the impact of them being so big is really quite compelling, makes the work extremely compelling. Alongside that, he has produced a new sound piece in his own Indigenous language, Bajara, which gives the work a particular atmosphere and an intensity to it. And especially when you're looking at it in the public realm, we rarely get to see or hear sound pieces alongside photographs, but his work always involves both areas. And also from dusk, because of course you can't show film projections really successfully outside on sunny days. We had chosen, the longest day in the year to launch this project, and it only gets dark at 9 p.m. And so from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning, we're showing his film work as well. And in that film work, which again explores all the subject matter I've been describing, Christian he performs in it, and he holds 2 Union Jacks in his mouth, and they softly float in the wind. And we think that this is a very interesting juxtaposition against Oxford Street at the moment, that's hanging with all these Union Jacks because of the Jubilee weekend. But of course, he's really questioning the whole notion of colonialism.
Yeah, well, you spoke there a little bit about the significance of the flags and what that wants to communicate, but the actual large-scale banners, if you wish, that you're going to put up, was there an aim in what he or the gallery wanted to communicate with those images?
He uses them to dress up. They're all him. I mean, people won't need to be told that because he's so unrecognisable. He changes his persona, and it's part of his performance. He's trying to perform different identities because he has been, and the Indigenous culture of people of Australia have been so straitjacketed into a certain way of perception over so many years that here he's performing new notions of himself. And they do refer to classic historical figures that have importance in Australian culture, such as King Billy. So the more that you know about the work, the more deeply engaged you will get. However democratic and accessible photography is as an art form, and I personally believe it is the most democratic art form in the world, people still hesitate at the door of a gallery because they think, is this really for me? And I'm really seeing my Soho Photography Quarter as like the turbine hall of the Tate Gallery, which just invites people in to enjoy free of charge and get used to the idea of art, of photography that might challenge them in some way, and encourage them then to make the next step into the gallery.
The Soho Photography Quarter is open now at Ramillies Place and Hill Place in Soho. One last check on the weather before we leave you. Overnight it will stay dry. Lows of around 12 degrees this evening, with cloud gradually clearing through in the early hours to produce some clear skies tomorrow morning. Tomorrow we'll see a bright and fine day throughout, with plenty of sunshine, around 24 degrees, and getting even warmer on Wednesday. More patchy cloud expected late Wednesday and throughout Thursday, but still very dry and very warm, high 20s. Right, that's all from us this evening. Thank you for watching, and do join us again at the same time tomorrow for more from the news team. But for now, good evening and take care.